chapter 5. You have 3 verses organized for myself here. Galatians chapter 5. We have been intentionally looking at the fruit of the Spirit, and we got here quite naturally. The order that we've been following is really stepping back. What does it take to function as community? What does it mean to be in Christian community? What are the things that are part of that? We focus on several things, but one of the areas that we talked about in that conversation was the whole notion of being in relationship such that we have a kind of accountability and an encouragement to one another. In other words, we don't just gather. We're here for a purpose, and that is about formation, shaping us, helping us to become all that God intends for us to become, but that it's not just a solo journey, but I need you, and you need me. And where we went in that whole conversation about accountability and encouragement is in trying to sort of say, well, okay, what's the marker, what's the goal, what's the aim of all this, is that we stop down here in this passage in Galatians chapter 5. And in it, the Apostle Paul paints a profound contrast in the way that sort of our attitudes and our actions will flow from us. On the one hand, if our custom is simply to ignore God's input in our lives, and we just sort of function by the seat of our pants in life, that there are invariably going to grow up into us these kinds of things that are not pleasing to the Lord. I know full well that in my own life, I've walked with the Lord for a long time since I was a teenager, but there has been this journey of undoing some things that were part of my reflexes and habits that really were not honoring to God. And I can tell you right now that it still surfaces, and I teased about this a few weeks ago when somebody cuts me off while driving. And I don't know what it is about driving. What is it? Is it because of the risk, right? I mean, you're powering this multi-thousand-pound vehicle. It can go fast, and it can do damage in an instant. And maybe all of us are subconsciously very attuned to the pressure, the tenseness, and the tension, and the risk that's inherent in driving a car. So that when somebody cuts you off, if they cut you off while you're walking, it's like, oh, sorry. They cut you off while you're driving, it's like, oh, no, this person down. Like, somehow that kind of comes out of us, and you all know what I'm talking about. But the contrast that Paul paints for us is that when one gives themselves over to the Lord and allows for God's Spirit to begin to be at work within them, and we intentionally listen for the guidance of God's Spirit and become vulnerable to the Lord and say, listen, I need you to do a work in me, that some of those things that were natural begin to not be the reflex anymore, but in fact some other very God-like reflexes begin to be born. And the emphasis that I really wanted us to catch as we spent this time in the fruit of the Spirit was that I am not simply, and the Scriptures are not simply pointing out ways which we should act. They are. But he talks about them as a fruit of the Spirit. In other words, this is something that is meant to grow up and out of us naturally as we interact with God through His Holy Spirit. This is a transformative thing, and I use that word a few times as we go today, that it's not just me working hard to be a good guy, but that God would do a work in me by His Spirit that actually makes me begin to reflex and say and think in ways that I would not without His part in my life. And so to keep the whole of this journey is our willingness to say, Lord God, I invite your Spirit to come into me and to work in me and to direct me and shape me and mold me and make me what you want me to be. And so in response to this idea of being filled or guided by God's Spirit, Paul goes through this list of things that we call the fruit of the Spirit. I do not believe that this is a complete list. I think what we get going here is that Paul just begins to list off the kinds of reflexes and things that will naturally begin to be birthed and born out of us when we are listening to God's Spirit. So let me read to you the passage again, and then we'll focus on a couple of the fruit that Paul identifies there. Verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. He says being legalistic has nothing on this. This is something that is born within you, and it's not about keeping the law. It's in fact that the law somehow becomes expressed to us very, very natural. We started with love, and we talked about this transforming work that God wants to do within us, so that I don't just simply do the work of law, but I actually begin to look at you with eyes of love. Last week we spent some time navigating through the life of the Apostle Paul. I mean, he's the one writing this, he's the one throwing these things out at us. When he says that the two of the fruit of the Spirit are to have joy and peace in our lives, it's worthwhile to have a look at his life and to find out whether he had joy and peace in his life. And what we saw, if you remember, is that we went back to the very beginning of his ministry, where he's gathered with some other believers, and they say that it seemed good to them that the Spirit of God was directing Paul and Barnabas to go. And so they prayed over them and the power of the Spirit. In obedience to the Spirit, they sent this man off. And then we looked at various events through the course of his life, and they were messy. And they were ugly, and they were hurtful. In fact, the guy experiences more pain, more suffering than anybody really should ever have to experience. And it's over and over and over and over again. And yet in his writings back to those with whom he is dialoguing, he consistently is saying, listen, be filled, be full, take joy, be content. And this is going again and again and again and again. We especially got into Philippians where he says, rejoice, I'll say it again, let your gentleness be evident to all, the Lord's near. And yet we're talking about a guy who was beaten, who was probably mostly blind, who is been arrested and had to escape out through the windows, has been lost at sea, and yet he's still encouraging people that find joy, find peace. It's there. I found the secret of being content in everything, whether well-fed or in need. He says, it's like, how does that work? When somebody's had such a brutal life, to have that kind of joy and peace and be able to say that to others. And the only answer is that, of course, because it didn't just be something that he said, I will be joyful. But in fact, he's giving witness in his own life that the Spirit of God has come to reside within him, and that there is something that gives to him that sense of peace and that sense of joy, regardless of the circumstances. And you all in this room have known or do know now painful days. And the only way you will know true joy, true peace in the middle of the worst of those storms is if we allow for the Spirit of God to somehow be invested into the whole of our being. Today, we go to those next two words that are there. Patience and kindness. Patience and kindness. Well, I've already been alluding a little bit to this challenge of being patient. In fact, let me just read to you a little scientific fact that I found very, very recently. You'll be impressed by this. This is deep science. A new study found that people who take their coffee black are more likely to exhibit psychopathic traits. Now listen to this. And people who order a quad-shot, non-fat, vanilla soy, extra foam, light whip with caramel drizzle are more likely to be their victims. That's deep study right there. I mean, you know that there are people that come across your life or situations that roll around, and it's like, yeah, I'm supposed to be patient with you, but why? What you really need is, the proverbial cuff up the side of the head because you're just a goof. We need these people, and yet it would seem to be, I think, if we were to do a careful journey through the New Testament especially, that God expects us to demonstrate patience. Now, patience is interesting. Patience, by definition, it's spent some time in a dictionary. The inference of the definition is that there's something that is provoking. There's something that is agitating. There's an external force at play that is demanding a response from me that is exhibited by the word we say, patience. If you're not having to be patient, then patience isn't part of what's going on. So it's kind of a dynamic thing. And so the act of being patient is to be conscious of that which is provoking you or stirring that desire to want to swing out, and to control yourself and to not do it. So there's this dynamic at play. I'm going to restrain myself intentionally. But one very key question that I think we need to ask, and to set it into the context of the scripture here today, is why? Why must I restrain myself? I mean, the car example that I gave to you, someone cutting me off and me wanting to chase them down, well, that's just stupid, right? Because I'm going to cause carnage and it's not going to... Sometimes there's easy answers for why do I need to be patient. But what about that person in your life who maybe over the course of years, long extended periods of time, they just annoy you? I hear the chuckle there, but you know what? The reality is that there are people and circumstances in our life that they just don't change. And the question is like, well, why? Why don't I just get a hold of them sometimes and say, listen, you know, smarten up. There'll be some counsel in the world that would say the best thing for you to do to somebody like that is to just really go up to them and smack them one. Knock them out of their silliness and into their senses. But that's inconsistent with the way that Jesus would have dialogued with people. And so the question, why would I have to continually express patience towards people who, maybe let's put it this way, don't deserve my patience? The answer, I think, is that patience in the context of Galatians and the fruit of the Spirit is that there is something else going on. There's an intentionality behind my patience. It's not simply that I don't want to hurt my hand on their face. It's not simply that I don't want to cause a scene. Like I have a goal in mind for that person. I have a goal in mind for that person. In other words, something's going on, it's provoking me, I'm agitated, I'm going to exhibit patience by not being provoked, I'm not going to act out in that. But why? Why? Because in that person is a need. I can maybe model the need, the answer to their need. I may be able to articulate the answer to their need. But the reality is that I can't give to them the answer to their need. The answer to their need comes by they themselves submitting themselves to God and His Spirit for a transformative work in their lives. Paul said in the book of Romans, the letter to the Romans, he says these words, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy, pleasing to God. It's a spiritual act of worship. And then he says this, now follow it. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, I'm not sure if you have read that passage and noticed the shift of verbs that is at play there. He says of those who would follow Jesus, don't conform anymore. There's all kinds of influences in your life that are trying to shape you and mold you and to do things and to develop patterns and habits that are not going to honor God. Now, if he was being consistent in his language, he would have said this, don't conform anymore to the pattern of the world, but instead conform yourself to the expectations of God. Right? Consistent words, conform and conform. I'm being shaped, I'm being squished into a mold over here that's not God-honoring. I have in the scriptures, and I have some examples of other friends and people and scenarios, patterns that I know would be God-honoring, so instead I'm going to conform myself to that pattern. You can use that verb the second time around. So don't be conformed, but instead be transformed. Now, I don't know how you make a shift from conforming to transforming, which are dramatically different verbs. Conforming is something that I do. It's my intention. It's the way that I respond to the situation. And there is and needs to be a whole lot of conforming after the things that please God. That's our responsibility. We need to do that. But transforming is not something that I can do myself. Transforming is something that happens because something else washes over me. And it causes for this transformation to happen in my life. And that absolutely must take us back then to this whole understanding of the fruit of the Spirit. The presence of God's Spirit in my life will bring a transformative reality in who I am. And so just as we did with love and with joy and peace, if I just stand up here and yell at you that you've got to love and you should be joyful and you must be at peace, all that it is me telling you to work harder. Just not a bad thing. But what's happening in this passage is an extraordinary invitation And it says that God wants to come into your life and bring transformation into your life. And when transformation comes into your life, you're going to look at that person who is perpetually annoying to you with a whole new set of eyes. Not just because I'm supposed to, but because it will happen. There will be in your heart, in response to the love of God that has overwhelmed you. We sang it in the songs during the worship time. We sang it during the hymn sing at the beginning. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul. Something changed in me when I met Jesus. It's not simply religious duty and discipline, but a relationship with God. And when He came into my life, I was changed and am being changed. And as I speak to the Spirit, I begin to gain new eyes for the people around me. And the person who is a jerk will cease to be a jerk in the dream that you have for him. So let's face it, without God's redirection and transformation, most of us want that person to go away. But when that transformation begins to happen in my life, you know what I want for that person? I want them to go away. I want them to discover what I discovered. So when we start asking the question, why should I be patient? Why should I resist that provocation and not act the way that my gut wants me to do? It's because now there is in fact this motivation for my patience. There's intention. There's a reason for why I would choose to be patient. Because somehow, at some point, if I can just continue to be forbearing of their attitude or whatever, maybe the light's going to come on for them. They're going to want to know what's going on. I don't have the reflexes that seem to be growing up in that person, and that person, that person, that person. So patience, it's not simply a virtue. It's a motivation. I am patient because I want for these people all around me to know Jesus and the transforming work of His Holy Spirit. Well, without spending nearly as much time, we can then step into the next word, which is kindness. Kindness. I mean, patience, right? It's kind of a disposition. It's something that happens inside of me. How am I going to respond? How am I going to act? What's kindness, though? You can't be kind without someone to be kind to. Right? Kindness is now an outward expression. These two words work so beautifully together. They really do. Patience is what's going on inside of me. And what comes out of me is either kindness or something other. And so now that I have settled in my mind that God is wanting to do this transforming work in my life through His Spirit, and although there is something happening in my life that is provoking anger, disappointment, discouragement, whatever's going on, I know that I am meant to respond with patience. Why am I meant to be responding with patience? Because God loves that person just as much as He loves me. Okay, I'm there. Lord, your Spirit, I need your strength. I need your direction. I need your Spirit to change my response now to one of patience. Why? Because I want this person to know you. What should I do about that? Now we step into kindness. Now we step into kindness. There's nothing more powerful that you will ever do for a sour person but to be kind to them. They don't always receive it, right? You've probably met somewhere along the line where they were just being mean-spirited to you, and you decided, well, I'm just going to be kind back to you, and they didn't even seem to bat an eye. They took advantage of you and took another step forward. That happens. That happens. But more often than not, you will catch their attention by that kindness. I like to know you can't do that without God's power. Can't. I will give a confession right now. At about 6:45, a couple mornings in the morning recently, someone pulled up on our street and was picking up someone in a house across the street for work. That was a kind gesture. I'll pick you up early in the morning. We'll go to work together. I don't know if he couldn't text. I didn't know if he didn't have legs so as to walk out and knock on the door, but he decided at 6:45 in the morning to sit on his horn. Say, buddy, I'm here. And you know what, I'm maybe even more acute to it now that I've got a little girl that we want to get her as much sleep as possible. I'm not sure. But finally, after one day and the honking out there, my wife's now looking at me through the door here. I was up. Pants on, shirt on, out I go across the street, walking towards the sky. Now, there's lots of ways I could have done this a whole lot better. I am quite sure that my body language from the time I came out the front door was making a beeline straight towards that car, was causing the testosterone to rise up in his system, and by the time I got there, this guy was in like total ready, sort of like, what's he going to get me? I'll tell you what I did. I want to tell you that this was wrong. He couldn't get his window down, so he opens the door. I said, do you have to honk your horn this early in the morning? Nice way to introduce yourself to somebody, right? How do you think he responded? I walked away as the rest of the neighborhood heard him coloring with language that ought not be repeated. He stopped honking until he drove away, and then he sat on the horn. Now, having just told you what I did, what ought I have done? Was he wrong? Yeah. Did I appreciate the horn going off in the morning? No. In fact, it just welled up in me in a kind of this anger. It was like, come on, buddy, you keep doing this. Stop doing this. Was it appropriate for me to go in and talk to him? Maybe, right? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one in the neighborhood that's kind of ticked off about this. In a perfect world, I would have had time to make a cup of coffee for him, right? Got a coffee for you. Hey, listen, I know it's early, you're late, and your friend's obviously slow coming out the door, but we've got a little girl and there's some other children in the neighborhood who could use that last hour of sleep beforehand. Like, who knows, right? But I didn't have to sort of barge out there with my bravado, my testosterone on high, and do that. I was not kind to that man, even though he was being a jerk. You get it? God loves that man. And judging by how quickly he snapped to a vitriolic anger, there's something going on in his life that's messy and hurting him. I don't know that I'll ever get a chance again to sort that one out with him. But what God through Paul is talking about is that this transformative work in our lives has to have an identity, a direction, a focus. And so I choose to be patient. God gives me the strength to be patient. Why? Because the action that is going to flow from that position of patience is going to dictate the way that I express or don't express kindness. And kindness is simply this: doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I've heard that somewhere before, and so have you. But I want to say emphatically, again, as I've been saying week after week after week, that is not going to come out of you naturally. What's going to come out of you naturally is what came out of me after that morning. But when we intentionally submit ourselves to the direction of God's Spirit, there's transformation that will happen. And different things are going to come out of us. So the call this morning in this message is to a patience. Patience in the face of that which would provoke you that says, no, I'm going to just hold it together. God's going to give you the strength to hold together. Why? Because there's something going on out there that I don't know all the details. But when I do step forward in action, it's going to be an expression of kindness. It's going to be an expression of kindness. And God bless us as we live in that kind of pattern together. We'll continue again next week. Let's pray. Father, Scriptures paint the scenario that in your Son, you emptied yourself for us. There are people who have functioned for the most part from generation upon generation without allowing you to have supreme lordship over our nations and over our wholeness as a people. You continually show patience towards us because you love us. And so, Lord, as I have received, as we have received your forgiveness through Christ, and have moved us from the outside to the inside of your family, I pray now, Lord God, that the transformative work of your Holy Spirit will be powerfully released into my life and the life of those who are in this place or those who have joined us online. A renewing of our mind, we want to say. Specifically then, out of today, Lord, would you, by your grace, enable me a patience that honors you, and may the action that falls forth from me be expressed principally as godly kindness. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. We'll sing one more song together. We've been singing it for the last several weeks. It is a song that talks about the fruit of the Spirit, and I'm glad that the song specifically talks about how this, in fact, is these expectations upon us are gifts. Let's stand together and sing in response as we conclude our time this morning. This week, Jesus' name.